What's up, Car Squad fam, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Derek and I do car reviews. Today we'll be checking out this 1997 Toyota 4Runner. It is an SR5 with four-wheel drive. When new, these had an MSRP of $25,808. These third-gen 4Runners ran from 1997 to 2002. This one sits at about 183,000 miles, and today I'll give you a tour around the exterior and interior of the vehicle, followed by a point of view drive, and then finally I'll wrap it up by giving you my thoughts on the vehicle. And one other thing, I am located up here in the Northern California Bay Area, so if you've got a vehicle up this way that I can review, please shoot me an email at the address listed here. Thanks. Before we get into the review of the vehicle, just a few details I wanted to share. This being an SR5 with a four-wheel drive, like I mentioned, it does ride about 1.5 inches taller than a standard two-wheel drive would. Now, the third-gen 4Runners were the first to not share its chassis with the Toyota Hilux. Instead, it shared its chassis with the Land Cruiser Prado, and some of its powertrain options came from the new, at the time, Toyota Tacoma. So starting off up front here in the engine bay, you'll see the 3.4 liter 5VZ FE V6 engine that powers this vehicle. This put out 183 horsepower and 217 pound-feet of torque. Gas mileage on this V6 is rated at 15 in the city, 18 on the highway, for a combined 16 miles per gallon. On a base third-gen 4Runner, you got a 2.7 liter 3RZ FE inline four-cylinder engine. That put out 150 horsepower and 177 pound-feet of torque. SR5 models like this included options like cruise control, a tilting steering wheel, and power door locks, along with that V6 motor. Now, in case you were wondering what SR5 stands for, it stands for Sports Runabout 5-Speed, referring to the 5-speed manual. However, of course, this is an automatic with that 4-speed. A manual transmission was available on the four-wheel drive models. However, all two-wheel drive versions came standard with an automatic transmission. I also wanted to point out that in the Japanese market, the Toyota Hilux Surf, which is their version of the Toyota 4Runner, was also available with two versions of a 3-liter diesel engine. Now, before we move into the trunk of the vehicle, I just wanted to share that this rear window does roll down. There's a button to do so from the interior, which I'll show you when we get to the interior review. However, if you're back here and you want to just, load something into the back without opening the whole tailgate, you can take your key here, put it in, and turn it to the left, and then that rear window will roll down. And now you can access here, have some surfboards maybe if you're hauling those, and if you throw a jacket or something in and that window can close, you just turn that to the right, and that window will go ahead and roll on back up. Pretty cool feature, especially when you've got all 5 windows down, cruising, getting that fresh air. Now, once back here in the trunk, you'll see you have plenty of storage space to haul whatever you may need to. You would also have the option of having a sliding cover. This vehicle in particular, however, does not have it. To the right side here, you'll also find a little storage space, small pocket to hide whatever items you may want to in there. You'll see with the back seats folded down, you have even more space. So it really gives you great flexibility with hauling larger items as well. Now, just to show you how to drop those back seats, what you would do is you pull the tab here to drop that seat down, and then from here you pull this tab, and that'll allow the seat back to fall forward. From there, you just release that headrest, and then that seat drops right on down, and then you store this somewhere, and now you've got a flat floor from here all the way to the back. So now moving into the back of the vehicle. Now, I am 6'1", the driver's seat is set to my driving position, and I fit pretty well back here. I have decent leg room, my knees are not touching the back of that front seat, and I've got pretty good headroom as well. It's a little tight, but my head is not touching the ceiling. I'm fine back here. I could find myself being comfortable on a long road trip. The seats themselves as well are pretty comfy and well cushioned, and they have held up quite well for 26 years and 183,000 miles of use. Now, as far as features go back here, there are not a ton. On the door panel, you just have your control to roll that window up and down, and you have a small pocket down below. There is no center folding armrest. Instead, what you'll find down below here is 2 cup holders that fold out. Now, these do feel a little flimsy and one of them is broken, but they are there. Below those cup holders, you'll find a small ashtray that pops out here. To the right of that, you'll see a button that says high and low. Now that is for your climate controls back here, which is nice that in 1997 this vehicle had that available. You have a slider below that to adjust that temperature up and down. However, the temperature is only heat, so there's no AC back here. It just adjusts the amount of heat and how hot you want it to be back here. But definitely a nice feature to have on a vehicle from 1997. Now as we move up front into the driver's seat of the vehicle, on the door panel here itself, you'll find your controls to roll those windows down. You have your lock and unlock button here alongside your window lockout switch. And then just in front of that, you do have your left and right mirror controls. Down below, you also do have a small pocket for some storage space. Now into the driver's seat itself now, it is quite a comfy seat to be in. Again, after 183,000 miles and 26 years, it's held up quite well. Now as far as seat adjustments go, down below you have your latch to slide the seat forward and back. On the side here, you've got your latch to adjust the seat back, and then this knob here allows you to adjust the lumbar support. Now as far as features and controls up here, it's very simple. To the left of the steering wheel here, you've got your control to adjust the brightness of that gauge cluster. Your wiper and blinker stocks feel very sturdy and well put together. They don't at all feel like 26 years old. On the right side of the steering wheel, you do have your cruise control buttons to manage that. And then down here on the left side of the steering wheel, again, this being an SR5 package, it did come with the steering wheel that can adjust up and down, and your button for that is right there. Now as far as other storage goes in here, you do have your center armrests, and as you'll see, they've got a couple of CDs in here right now, so you can store a decent amount of items in there. Now just in front of that, you do have, of course, your handbrake, as well as that button to roll down and up that rear window that I mentioned earlier. Down here, you'll also find your electronically controlled transmission button. What this does is briefly increase power in certain driving conditions by manipulating transmission shift points. Now just in front of that, you do have a small storage pocket here. Of course, your gear shifter here to the right, along with your shifter for those four-wheel drive options. Then just in front of that, you do have a cigarette lighter alongside a coin holder. Above that, you will find your very simple audio controls, nothing complicated like modern vehicles have. And of course on this you have a tape and CD player. On that point of easy to use, that simplicity is continued up above with the climate controls, nothing complicated, just sliders to adjust that air temperature up and down between warm and cold air, as well as where that air is coming out of up top, down below, defrosting the windshield and so forth. Now your cup holders are up high here, so they slide out and then open up like so. I'm not too sure how many drinks are actually stored up here. It does seem that it's a little high and could be a little flimsy at times, as well as probably dripping everything down below onto those audio controls and your gear shifter below, but they are there. Right above that, you do have your clock as well. Now this vehicle also does have a sunroof and moonroof, so your controls for that can be found right here. To tilt it up, you use the button on the left. To slide that sunroof open and close, the button on the right which says slide. Pretty straightforward to use. And to the right of that, you do have a pocket that opens up here. I believe that is where, if you had a garage opener, that would go. Now the last thing to look at before we get this out on the road is the sun visors. They do flip down and out, however they do not slide out. Well, that wraps up the tour of the vehicle. Now I'm going to put you in the driver's seat for a point of view drive. power is pretty good. You know, typically I don't talk during this portion, but I did want to share that, you know, merging on the freeway just there and earlier, you're able to get up to 60, 70 miles an hour pretty easily. And again, that's with 183,000 miles on it. So it rides very comfortably and quite smooth. It's comfortable cruising here at 60, 70 miles an hour. There is a little bit of rattling, which you may have been hearing, and it seemed that is coming from this passenger seat back when you go over bumps. And here in the Bay Area in California, our roads are quite bad, but here, I mean, the vehicle is riding very smooth. But when I put my hand to the back of that seat back, it seems to get it to stop when I'm going over those bumps. So I would assume that if you've got a passenger in that seat where there's weight on that seat back, it's not able to wiggle around as much. I think it would be fine, and you probably wouldn't hear that as much. Aside from that seat back rattle, there really isn't anything else that are weird rattles or noises in here. Everything is, you know, fine. It runs very smooth. The engine feels healthy, as you would expect. I mean, I would consider 183,000 miles on one of these pretty low. You know, they can easily get 300, 400,000 miles or more on these V6 4Runner engines. So yeah, just, I mean, ride smooth, suspension feels good, shocks feel good, all that. No issues or anything that I can find to complain about in here, really. Of course, you've got a few things like here on your temperature controls, the knob here on the switch to turn it off and on, that knob is missing, as well as on the slider for where, you know, which vent it comes out of, but it's still usable. You just don't have that nice big covered knob, but the switch there is still available for you to use. All right, so my thoughts on the 1997 Toyota 4Runner SR5 with four-wheel drive. Now, this was a cool vehicle for me to review. Growing up, my uncle out on the East Coast in New York, he had one of these third-gen 4Runners, and I remember just going out there every summer, cruising around in the back seat of it, and then as I got older, he allowed me to drive it, and I had my fair share of time driving it around New York. He used that vehicle on long road trips all throughout the East Coast up to Canada, and he then gave it to my cousin who had it down in Florida up until about last year. And I think it just got to the point where, you know, the salt on the East Coast with snow, the rust, and just other things, I think it got to the end of its life. But it was a great vehicle while he had it. And that's what these 4Runners and third-gen 4Runners in particular are just so well known for. They're workhorses. They can take you everywhere, and the maintenance is not too bad on them. They're reliable and doesn't need a lot of upkeep, just normal routine maintenance, and it'll pretty much last forever. Now, speaking of that salt and rust, that is something that you do need to be aware of if you're looking for one of these. On vehicles with an automatic transmission, you'll want to look for what they call a pink or strawberry milkshake. That happens when the engine coolant and transmission fluid mix, and that happens as a result of corroded lines in the radiator. So that's something to look for on these if you are in the market for one. They're also known to develop sagging rear springs, and they can develop warped brake rotors, and some even had failure of the lower ball joint. So just make sure all those things are sorted if you're looking for one. As I mentioned during the driving portion, the vehicle drove very well for a vehicle with 183,000 miles and 26 years old. It was quite smooth. There were no weird creaks, rattles, or anything vibrating aside from, like I mentioned during the driving portion, that passenger seat back seemed to be vibrating a little bit over bumps, but if I applied pressure with my hand to the back of that seat, that stopped. So like I said, I'd imagine if you had a passenger in that seat, that would eliminate that noise. Otherwise, everything was fine. You know, a few of the tabs on those sliders for the air controls were missing, but the handle itself was still there. It just didn't have that nice little rubber finish, and I'm sure you could find those aftermarket on eBay for a few bucks if you really wanted. The power was fine to me for merging onto the freeway. It was very comfortable cruising at 60 to 70 miles an hour. Ride was smooth, seats were comfy, and the visibility was quite good as well. You know, with the shape of the vehicle being basically a big box, visibility out through the back and any blind spots that there may be in other vehicles is not there. I personally think these 3rd gen 4Runners are probably one of the best SUVs of all time. They're reliable, easy to maintain, comfy to drive, they can haul people, and they also, you know, when well kept, have a little bit of a collector aspect to them. And then again, of course, they have the ability to go off-road. So it does a little bit of everything, and all those things that it does very well. The other nice thing about it is it's not an overly large vehicle compared to modern standards. A 3rd gen 4Runner is actually shorter in length than a modern RAV4. RAV4 from the previous generation is actually 3 inches longer than the current generation 2023 RAV4. So it's shorter than what is now a small SUV, and a current 4Runner is about 12 inches longer than a 3rd generation 4Runner. Now, as far as pricing goes, that can be a little bit all over the place with these, and of course depending on which engine it has, if it's 4-wheel drive or 2-wheel drive, if it's a manual or automatic. But in general, I think you can find a pretty beat high mileage one for under $5,000, and you can do with it what you want. On the other hand, there are those more collector ones, you know, 4-wheel drive, manual transmission, very low mileage, has been garaged. Those are carrying, you know, at least high 20s. So basically what you would have paid for one of these brand new back in the day, and maybe even more than that into the 30s. But occasionally I have seen what I think is a pretty good deal. One's listed between about $8,000 and maybe 11.5, and they have what I think is low mileage for one of these, about 100 to 130,000 miles, and it's a clean title car. The vehicle looks to be pretty clean. However, every time one of these is listed in that price range with that type of mileage, within a day or two, or just even a few hours, it's sold and gone. But if you're looking for something reliable, cool, and functional, then I think this is a great vehicle to go with. It's one of my favorite SUVs, if not my favorite SUV of all time. The ease of maintenance, you know, you just check on some of those things I mentioned earlier, get it checked out, and as long as it passes all those tests, then I think you've got a vehicle that can last you a lifetime. Well, that wraps up the review of this 1997 Toyota 4Runner. I hope you enjoyed the review of it. If you did, please be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you're not already. And a big thank you to the owner for allowing us to review and check out this vehicle. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.